The mop bucket hit the bathroom floor with a splash that echoed off grimy tiles like a gunshot. Dirty water sloshed over the edges, mixing with whatever horrors already stained the cracked linoleum beneath Maya Stodd's sneakers. She stood frozen in the doorway, her small frame silhouetted against the harsh fluorescent light that buzzed overhead like angry wasps. "Get moving." Charity case. Brooklyn Martinez sneered from behind her, arms crossed over her designer Letterman jacket. "Those stains won't clean themselves." Maya's fingers trembled around the wooden handle. The smell hit her first. Bleach and something worse. Something that made her stomach lurch and her eyes water. But it wasn't the stench that made her hands shake. It was the three girls blocking her only exit, their phones already raised like weapons. Red recording lights blinking in the dim bathroom like predator eyes in the dark. She should have seen this coming. Should have known that walking past the old West Wing bathroom after 7th period was a mistake. Should have remembered that Brooklyn Martinez didn't just hurt people with words. She preferred an audience. "What's wrong?" Brooklyn's voice was honey over broken glass. "Too good to clean up after your betters?" Maya said nothing. She'd learned early that silence was armor. Words were ammunition they could use against you later. Twisted and weaponized in ways that left scars deeper than bruises. But silence? Silence gave them nothing to work with except their own cruelty. And sometimes that was enough to reveal who they really were. The Westfield High bathroom hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Cracked mirrors reflected fractured images. Rust stains bled down white porcelain like old wounds. 3 stalls stood like prison cells, their doors hanging askew on broken hinges, and in the far corner, beneath a window too high and too dirty to let in real light, sat the janitor's closet where Maya had been cornered. She'd been heading to her locker. Same route she took every day. Quiet hallways, empty classrooms, anywhere the popular kids didn't congregate. Maya Stodd had perfected the art of being invisible at Westfield High. At 5 feet 2 inches and barely 100 pounds, with straight black hair that fell like a curtain across her face, and clothes that whispered thrift store rather than shouted designer. She moved through the school like a ghost. That was by design. Maya had transferred to Westfield 3 months ago when her mom finally scraped together enough money to rent a tiny apartment in the district. Before that, it had been community college courses at 16, homeschooling in between her mother's double shifts at the diner, and dreams of MIT that felt as distant as stars. But Westfield High had a robotics program that could change everything. A pathway to scholarships, to colleges, to a future that didn't involve choosing between textbooks and groceries. She just had to survive senior year first. I said, "Get moving." Brooklyn's voice cut through Maya's thoughts like a blade. Behind her, Skylar Johnson and Harper Williams flanked the door like sentries. Skylar's strawberry blonde curls were pulled into a perfect ponytail that probably cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe. Harper's green eyes sparkled with the kind of cruelty that came from never having to face consequences. All three of them wore the same expression, entitled amusement, the look of people who'd never been told no and couldn't imagine a world where their actions mattered more than their last names. Maya knelt beside the bucket. The water was ice cold and murky, floating with debris she didn't want to identify. She dipped the mop in, wrung it out with hands that shook just slightly, and began to clean. "Slower," Brooklyn commanded, stepping closer. Her boots were designer, probably worth more than Maya's mom made in a week. "I want to make sure you get every spot." The mop dragged across ancient tiles, picking up years of neglect and whatever fresh horrors had been added recently. Maya worked in silence, her movements mechanical, practiced. This wasn't the first time she'd cleaned something she shouldn't have to clean. Poverty taught you that survival sometimes meant swallowing your pride along with everything else. But as she worked, something else stirred beneath the humiliation, something that had been sleeping for months, buried under the weight of keeping her head down and her mouth shut, something that remembered different lessons, taught in a different place, by different hands. "Look at her go," Skylar giggled, her phone capturing every moment like she was born for this. "Must feel just like home." Harper added with a smirk, "I heard her mom works at that dive on Route 9, the one with the roaches." Maya's grip tightened on the mop handle. The muscles in her shoulders tensed just slightly. Not enough to notice unless you knew what to look for. Unless you'd spent years learning to read the signs that came before the storm. Careful, Brooklyn warned, but her tone was playful. Don't work too hard. We wouldn't want you to hurt yourself. She kicked over a trash can as she said it. Crumpled papers, empty bottles, and worse scattered across the freshly mopped floor like confetti from hell. Oops, Brooklyn said, not sounding sorry at all. Looks like you missed a spot. Maya stared at the mess. At 3 years of garbage spreading across tiles she'd just finished cleaning. At the phones recording her humiliation for an audience that would never have to know what it felt like to choose between dignity and survival. And for the first time in months, Maya Stodd spoke. No, the word hung in the air like smoke. Quiet, but solid. Final. Brooklyn blinked. Excuse me? Maya straightened slowly, the mop still in her hands. When she looked up, her dark eyes held something that hadn't been there before. Something that made Brooklyn take an unconscious step backward. I said no. Maya's voice was calm, controlled. Nothing like the whisper Brooklyn had expected. I'm not cleaning that up. Oh. You're not? Brooklyn's surprise flickered into anger. Who do you think you are? Someone who's done being your entertainment. Skylar and Harper exchanged glances. This wasn't how these things usually went. The scholarship kids were supposed to break quietly, cry prettily, provide content that would get them likes without requiring any real effort. They weren't supposed to stand up. They weren't supposed to fight back. They definitely weren't supposed to look dangerous. You think because you get good grades, you're special? Brooklyn stepped closer, her voice rising. You think because the teachers kiss your ass, you belong here? Maya said nothing, but something in her posture shifted. Her feet spread slightly wider. Her center of gravity dropped. Her hands, still gripping the mop, held it differently now. Less like a cleaning tool, more like a weapon. My dad donates more to this school in a year than your family makes in 10. Brooklyn continued, emboldened by her own voice. You're here on charity. A diversity token, a pity case they keep around to make themselves feel better about helping the poor. Still nothing from Maya, but her breathing changed. Deeper, more controlled. The way someone breathes before they need oxygen for something more demanding than standing still. You know what I think? Brooklyn was close enough now that Maya could smell her expensive perfume, could see the way her lip gloss caught the light. I think you need to remember your place. She reached out to grab Maya's shoulder. That was her first mistake. Maya moved like water. One moment she was standing still, docile, defeated. The next, Brooklyn's wrist was trapped in her grip, twisted at an angle that made the older girl gasp. The mop clattered to the floor. Forgotten. Let go of me, Brooklyn snarled, trying to pull away. But Maya's fingers were like steel cables, and her grip only tightened. You're hurting me, Brooklyn said, her voice higher now, edged with something that might have been fear. Maya looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, saw past the designer clothes and perfect makeup to the girl underneath. The girl who'd never been told no, who'd never had to fight for anything, who'd never learned that sometimes the quiet ones are quiet for a reason. Good, Maya said softly. Then she let go. Brooklyn stumbled backward, rubbing her wrist. Red marks were already forming where Maya's fingers had been. She stared at them like she couldn't quite believe they were real. You can't do that, she stammered. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is? I know who you are, Maya said, her voice steady as stone. You're someone who's never been held accountable for anything in your life. Someone who thinks money makes you untouchable. She picked up the mop, wrung it out, and began cleaning up the trash Brooklyn had scattered. Not because she had to, because she chose to. You're someone who doesn't understand that respect isn't inherited. Maya continued, working with smooth, efficient movements. It's earned. And bullying doesn't make you powerful. It just makes you pathetic. Skylar's phone shook in her hands. This wasn't the video she'd planned to upload. This wasn't the story they'd come here to tell. Brooklyn's face flushed red. You little freak, you think this is over? Maya finished cleaning and stood, facing the 3 girls who suddenly seemed smaller than they had 10 minutes ago. No, she said calmly. I think it's just beginning. You have no idea what you just started. Brooklyn hissed. No idea what I can do to you. Try me. The challenge hung between them like a live wire, Brooklyn's hands clenched into fists. Skylar and Harper flanked her, uncertain but loyal. 3 against 1 in a bathroom where no one would hear anything that happened next. Maya didn't flinch, didn't back down, didn't even blink. Because what they didn't know, what none of them suspected about the quiet girl who cleaned floors and kept her head down, was that Maya Stodd had been keeping more than just her grades to herself. For the past 8 years, every weekend and 3 nights a week, she'd walked into Master Lou's dojo on the south side of town. She'd learned to fall without breaking, to strike without warning, to move like silk and hit like lightning. She'd learned that true strength was invisible until the moment you needed it most. And looking at Brooklyn Martinez's perfectly manicured hands curled into fists that had never known real violence, Maya realized that moment had finally arrived. Last chance? Brooklyn said, her voice shaking with rage. Get on your knees and apologize, or I'm going to make your life hell. Maya tilted her head slightly. Studying her opponent the way a scientist might examine an interesting specimen, Brooklyn was taller, maybe 130 pounds. No calluses on her hands. Probably never been in a real fight in her life. Her stance was all wrong. Weight distributed poorly. Balance non-existent. This would be over in seconds. No, Maya said one final time. Brooklyn lunged. Time fractured. Brooklyn's manicured nails reached for Maya's face like claws. Her mouth twisted in a snarl that was all fury and no technique. But Maya wasn't there anymore. She'd shifted left. Just enough. Just barely. Letting Brooklyn's momentum carry her past. The elbow strike caught Brooklyn in the ribs. Not hard enough to break anything. Just hard enough to teach a lesson. Brooklyn doubled over. The air rushing out of her lungs in a whoosh of designer perfume and shock. She hit the bathroom wall and slid down, landing in an undignified heap next to the toilet she'd wanted Maya to clean. Skylar screamed, a high, piercing sound that echoed off the tiles like breaking glass. Harper backed toward the door, her phone forgotten in her hand. The recording still running but capturing something she'd never intended to film. And Maya stood in the center of the bathroom, breathing calmly. Her dark hair still falling across her face like a curtain, but now it felt less like hiding and more like a warning. A reminder that still waters run deep, and the quiet ones are often quiet for a reason. Brooklyn groaned from the floor, clutching her side. You? You hit me. You attacked me. Maya replied simply, I defended myself. This isn't over. Brooklyn wheezed, struggling to get back to her feet. Blood trickled from her lip where it had split against the wall. Her perfect makeup was smeared, her designer jacket wrinkled and dirty. Maya watched her with the detached calm of someone who'd just swatted a particularly annoying fly. Yes, it is, but even as she said it, Maya knew she was wrong. She could see it in Brooklyn's eyes, in the way Skylar clutched her phone like a lifeline, in the look Harper shot toward the door like she was calculating how fast she could run to find backup. This wasn't ending. This was escalating. Brooklyn finally made it to her feet, swaying slightly. Do you have any idea what you've done? Her voice was thick with blood and rage. Do you know who you're messing with? Someone who's never been hit before. Maya observed. Someone who's never learned that actions have consequences. Consequences? Brooklyn locked. A sound like breaking glass. You want to talk about consequences? Fine. Let's talk about them. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, her fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. Daddy? It's me. I need you to come to school. Now. Yes. I know you're in a meeting. This is more important. A pause. Brooklyn's eyes never left Maya's face. Some psycho scholarship kid just attacked me. In the bathroom, Skylar and Harper saw the whole thing. She's completely unstable. Dangerous. I think she might have a weapon. Maya's blood went cold. She'd been so focused on the immediate threat, she'd forgotten about the larger game. Brooklyn wasn't just a bully. She was a bully with connections, with lawyers, with a father who sat on the school board and donated enough money to have buildings named after him. 20 minutes? Brooklyn said into the phone, her voice already sounding stronger. Perfect. And Daddy? Call Principal Morrison. Tell him to keep her here until you arrive. We can't let this kind of violence go unpunished. She ended the call and smiled. It was the kind of smile that belonged on a shark, Richard Martinez, she said, savoring each syllable like expensive wine. City councilman, school board president, and my very protective father who doesn't like it when people hurt his little girl. Skylar giggled nervously. Oh my God. Maya, you are so screwed. Completely screwed. Harper agreed, emboldened by Brooklyn's recovery. Do you know what Mr. Fatebald Martinez did to the last kid who messed with Brooklyn? He had him expelled, blacklisted from every decent school in the state, ruined his whole future. Maya felt the walls closing in. Not the bathroom walls, but something bigger, something systematic. She'd been so concerned with defending herself against 3 teenagers, she'd forgotten she was fighting an entire machine designed to protect people like Brooklyn and crush people like her. Still feeling tough? Brooklyn asked, dabbing at her split lip with a tissue. Still think you can just hit your way out of problems? For the first time since the confrontation began, Maya felt fear creep into her chest. Real fear. Not of physical violence, but of something worse, of watching her dreams disappear because she dared to fight back against someone untouchable. I was defending myself, Maya said, but her voice lacked the certainty it had held moments before. Says who? Brooklyn shrugged. 3 witnesses say you attacked me unprovoked. Say you've been threatening me for weeks. Say you're clearly unstable and dangerous. That's not true. Truth is what people believe, Brooklyn replied, and people tend to believe pretty well-connected girls over angry scholarship, kids with violence problems. She was right, and they all knew it. Maya could feel her future slipping away like sand through her fingers. MIT, robotics, everything she'd worked for, everything her mother had sacrificed for, vanishing because she'd refused to clean up garbage she hadn't scattered. There's still a way out of this, Brooklyn said, her voice taking on a deceptively reasonable tone. A way we can all forget this little incident ever happened. Maya said nothing, but her posture remained tense. Ready. Get back on your knees. Brooklyn continued. Clean this floor properly. All of it. Every stain. Every corner. Every disgusting inch. And while you do it, apologize. For hitting me. For thinking you could challenge me. For forgetting your place. She paused, letting the weight of the ultimatum settle. Do that. And maybe I tell my father it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe your scholarship stays intact. Maybe you get to keep pretending you belong here. Maya stared at the mop bucket, at the dirty water and broken dreams floating in its depths. She thought about her mother, working double shifts to keep them in this district, about the acceptance letters she'd imagined receiving, about the life she'd planned that suddenly felt as fragile as spider silk. 10 seconds, Brooklyn said, checking her phone. Then my father gets here and your choices disappear. Maya knelt. Not because she wanted to, not because Brooklyn was right, but because sometimes survival meant swallowing more than pride. Sometimes it meant choosing between dignity and everything else you'd ever wanted. She picked up the mop, with hands that trembled with suppressed rage. Say it, Brooklyn commanded, her voice thick with triumph. Say you're sorry. Maya dipped the mop in the bucket, wrung it out, began to clean. Each stroke felt like a piece of her soul being scraped away. She began, then stopped. In the cracked mirror across the bathroom, Maya caught sight of her own reflection, kneeling on dirty tile, mop in hand. 3 girls standing over her like conquerors. But there was something else in that reflection. Something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Recognition. She'd seen this exact scene before, 8 years ago, in Master Lu's dojo. When she'd been 9 years old and smaller than she was now, she'd been sparring with an older student, a boy who'd been training longer and thought he knew better. He'd knocked her down, stood over her while she was winded, demanded she apologize for wasting his time. Master Lu had watched in silence as Maya considered her options. Apologize, or face the consequences of defiance. She'd chosen defiance then, had gotten back up, adjusted her technique, and proceeded to demonstrate that size and experience meant nothing without wisdom. The older boy had left the dojo that day with a limp and a lesson about underestimating opponents. Afterward, Master Lu had pulled her aside. Little dragon, he'd said, in his heavily accented English, what did you learn today? That I'm stronger than I thought? No. His weathered face had been serious. Patient. You learn that there is a difference between knowing when to yield and knowing when to strike. Both require wisdom. Both require courage. The mistake most people make is thinking they are the same thing. He'd paused, letting that sink in. True strength is not about proving you can fight. It is about choosing the right moment to stop holding back. Maya lifted her head, studying Brooklyn's reflection in the cracked mirror, saw the way the older girl's weight was distributed, saw how Skylar and Harper had relaxed, assuming the show was over, saw how all three of them had forgotten that a cornered animal was at its most dangerous. She stood up. I said, "Get back down." Brooklyn snapped, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. Something had changed in Maya's posture, in the way she held herself. Maya turned to face them, the mop still in her hands, but now it wasn't a cleaning tool. It was 6 feet of solid wood with a metal attachment, wielded by someone who'd spent years learning how to turn anything into a weapon. "You know what I learned today?" Maya asked conversationally. Brooklyn backed up a step. "What are you doing?" "I learned that bullies like you always make the same mistake." Maya's voice was calm, almost friendly. "You assume that because someone yields once, they'll yield forever." The mop moved in Maya's hands, spinning like a bow staff, metal gleaming under fluorescent lights. "You assume that quiet means weak, that poor means powerless, that cornered means defeated. You're crazy." Skylar whispered, her phone forgotten. "Maybe." Maya agreed, but crazy beats connected. When crazy knows how to fight, Brooklyn's phone buzzed. A text. Without taking her eyes off Maya, she glanced at the screen. "Daddy's in the parking lot," she said, her voice pitched higher than before. "You need to stop this right now, or you're going to face charges. Real legal consequences." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Probably, but your father's going to find something interesting when he gets here." "What are you talking about?" Maya gestured with her chin towards Skylar's phone. "Your friend there has been recording this whole time. Everything. You ordering me to clean. You threatening me. You lying to your father about me having a weapon." Understanding dawned in Brooklyn's eyes, followed quickly by panic. "And the beautiful thing about video evidence," Maya continued, still spinning the mop like a weapon, "is that it's really hard to argue with, especially when it shows 3 girls cornering one, forcing her to clean their mess, and then lying to authority figures about what really happened." Skylar's hands shook as she realized what Maya was saying. The video that was supposed to be their weapon had become their liability. "Delete it," Brooklyn ordered. "Too late," Maya said with a smile that held no warmth. "Cloud backup. Auto-upload. Haven't you ever heard of technology?" That was a lie. But they didn't know that. Maya had no idea if Skylar's phone was backing up to anything. But the fear in the other girl's eyes suggested she was wondering the same thing. "You're bluffing," Brooklyn said, but she didn't sound certain. "Am I?" Maya took a step forward, and all 3 girls instinctively stepped back. "Want to bet your father's political career on it? Want to bet your future on whether or not that video gets uploaded to every social media platform by tonight?" The bathroom fell silent, except for the buzz of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway. Heavy footsteps. Adult footsteps. Getting closer. Brooklyn's face cycled through emotions. Rage. Fear. Calculation. Desperation. "What do you want?" she finally asked. Maya smiled. Not the scared, apologetic expression they'd expected, but something else. Something that suggested the quiet girl had always been quietly dangerous, and they'd just been too blind to see it. "What I want," Maya said, lowering the mop but keeping her stance ready, "is for you to understand something very important." The footsteps stopped outside the bathroom door. "I'm not going anywhere," Maya continued. "I earned my place here, and I'm keeping it. And if you or anyone else tries to intimidate me again, if you try to make me crawl or beg or apologize for existing," she lifted the mop again, demonstrating a complex spinning pattern that would have impressed Master Lu. "Well, let's just say you'll discover that 8 years of martial arts training is a terrible thing to waste." The bathroom door opened. "Brooklyn, are you in there?" A man's voice, deep and authoritative. Richard Martinez, city councilman and school board president, looking for his injured daughter. Maya and Brooklyn locked eyes one final time. In that moment, both girls understood that whatever happened next would change everything. The old rules. The old hierarchy. The old assumptions about who had power and who didn't. All of it was about to be rewritten. In here, Daddy, Brooklyn called, her voice artificially sweet. We were just having a conversation. The door swung open fully, revealing a tall man in an expensive suit, his face already set in the expression of someone prepared to destroy whoever had dared touch his little girl. Richard Martinez stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, his daughter, rumpled and bloody, two other girls backing toward the windows, and in the center of it all, a small Asian girl holding a mop like a weapon, her dark eyes reflecting something that made him unconsciously reach for his phone. What exactly, he said slowly, is going on here? Maya and Brooklyn looked at each other one more time. The next words spoken would determine everything. Who was the victim? Who was the aggressor? And who would walk away from this bathroom with their future intact? Maya hefted the mop, feeling its weight, its balance, y potentiel. Then she smiled, and Richard Martinez realized that his daughter might have bitten off more than she could chew. Richard Martinez stepped into the bathroom like a man entering a courtroom where he'd already decided the verdict. His Italian leather shoes clicked against wet tile as he surveyed the damage, Brooklyn's split lip, Skylar's terrified expression, Harper pressed against the window like she wanted to melt through the glass, and Maya stood, standing in the center of it all with a mop that somehow looked more dangerous than any weapon he'd seen in his 20 years of politics. Brooklyn, sweetheart, Richard said, his voice deceptively calm. Tell Daddy exactly what happened here. Maya watched the calculation flicker across Brooklyn's face. The girl was smart enough to know that lies had consequences, but privileged enough to believe she could control them. In the span of 3 seconds, Maya saw her decide which version of the truth would serve her best. She went crazy. Daddy, Brooklyn said, touching her split lip for emphasis. I was just trying to talk to her about her attitude problem. And she completely snapped, started swinging that thing around like some kind of ninja. Richard's eyes narrowed as they fixed on Maya. She could practically see him building a case in his mind. Troubled scholarship student. History of violence. Dangerous disruption to his daughter's safety. Is that true? He asked Maya, his tone suggesting he'd already decided it was. Maya hefted the mop slightly, feeling its weight. In her peripheral vision, she could see Skylar's phone, still recording, still capturing every word, every gesture, every carefully constructed lie. No seer. Maja said quietly. It's not. Richard's eyebrows rose. He wasn't used to being contradicted, especially not by teenage girls who looked like they weighed less than his briefcase. Then perhaps you'd like to tell me your version of events? Maya glanced at Brooklyn, who was already shaking her head frantically. The message was clear. Lie. And maybe this goes away quietly. Tell the truth, and face the full weight of the Martinez family influence. Maya made her choice. Your daughter and her friends cornered me in here, she said, her voice steady and clear. They forced me to clean this floor with dirty mop water. When I refused to clean up garbage, they deliberately scattered. Brooklyn attacked me. I defended myself. Defended yourself? Richard's voice climbed an octave. By assaulting my daughter? By stopping her from assaulting me? That's not what happened. Brooklyn protested, but there was panic creeping into her voice. Now, Daddy. She's lying. She's trying to make me look bad because she knows she's in trouble. Richard pulled out his phone. I'm calling Principal Morrison. And then I'm calling the police. This kind of violence against students won't be tolerated. Wait, Maya said. Something in her tone made Richard pause, his finger hovering over the screen. Before you make any calls. Maja continued. You might want to see the evidence. She nodded towards Skylar, whose face had gone pale as winter. Your daughter's friend there has been recording this entire encounter, every word, every threat, every lie your daughter just told you. Richard's gaze snapped to Skylar, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the tile floor. Is this true? He demanded. Skylar's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. We were just. Show me the phone. Richard ordered. Daddy. No. Brooklyn said quickly. It's not what you think. But Richard Martinez hadn't built a political career by ignoring evidence when it was presented to him. He held out his hand. and after a moment of terrified hesitation, Skylar surrendered her device. Maya watched Richard's face as he scrolled through the video, watched his expression change from righteous anger to confusion to something that looked disturbingly like recognition. He wasn't just seeing his daughter bully another student. He was seeing himself, the same entitled arrogance, the same assumption that power meant immunity, the same casual cruelty toward anyone deemed lesser. "Brooklyn," he said quietly, not looking up from the screen. "What is this, Daddy?" "I can explain. You ordered her to clean a bathroom floor," Richard said, his voice deadly calm. "You called her a charity case. You threatened to ruin her future if she didn't comply. She doesn't belong here," Brooklyn said desperately. "She's just some scholarship kid who thinks she's better than everyone else. I was putting her in her place." The slap echoed off the bathroom tiles like a gunshot. Brooklyn's hand flew to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. In 17 years of life, her father had never laid a hand on her, never even raised his voice beyond mild disappointment. "Richard Martinez does not raise daughters who abuse their privilege," he said, his voice barely controlled fury. "Richard Martinez does not raise daughters who terrorize students because of their economic status." He turned to Maya, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. "Shame, Miss Stodd, I presume?" When Maya nodded, he continued, "I owe you an apology, multiple apologies, for my daughter's behavior, for my assumptions, and for the system that taught her she could treat people this way without consequences." "Daddy." "What are you doing?" Brooklyn whispered. "What I should have done years ago," Richard replied. "Teaching you that actions have consequences." He handed Skylar's phone back to her, but not before doing something that made all three girls freeze. "I forwarded that video to my own device," he said, "and I'll be forwarding it to Principal Morrison, the school board, and anyone else who needs to understand what really happened here today." "You can't do that." Harper spoke for the first time, her voice barely audible. "My parents will kill me. Your parents will have to get in line behind mine," Richard said grimly. "This behavior reflects on all of us, on this school, this community, and every value we claim to represent." Maya lowered the mop slowly, beginning to understand that the battlefield had shifted in ways she hadn't anticipated. However, Richard continued, turning back to her. "I am curious about something. That demonstration with the mop. Where exactly did you learn to handle a weapon like that?" Maya straightened her shoulders. This was the moment she'd been dreading and preparing for, in equal measure. "Lou's Traditional Martial Arts Academy," she said. "I've been training there for 8 years. 8 years," Richard repeated thoughtfully. "That's serious commitment. Expensive commitment." "I work at the dojo," Maya explained. "Cleaning, administrative tasks, helping with children's classes. Master Lou lets me train in exchange for labor." "And what style do you practice?" "Primarily Wing Chun Kung Fu, with elements of karate and weapons training." Richard nodded slowly. "I know Master Lou. He's trained several police officers in our district. His reputation for discipline and control is exceptional." Brooklyn looked back and forth between her father and Maya, like she was watching a tennis match where the ball had suddenly turned into a hand grenade. "I also know," Richard continued, "that Master Lou doesn't teach his students to start fights, only to finish them when absolutely necessary." "That's correct, Sire. So when my daughter attacked you, you demonstrated restraint by not seriously injuring her, despite having the skills to do so." Maya nodded. "Master Lou teaches that the greatest victory is the one that doesn't require violence. But he also teaches that sometimes violence is unavoidable, and when it comes, it should be swift and decisive." Richard was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made even Maya tense. "Brooklyn, you're going to apologize to Miss Stodd, sincerely and publicly. You're going to withdraw from student government. You're going to perform 100 hours of community service at organizations that serve underprivileged students. And you're going to start therapy to address whatever made you think this behavior was acceptable." "Daddy." "No. You can't. I can. And I will. Furthermore, you're grounded until graduation. No car. No credit cards. No social events. You'll ride the bus like the students you look down on. And maybe you'll learn something about humility. Brooklyn's face crumpled. This isn't fair. She hit me first. No, Richard said firmly. You attacked her first. You just didn't do it with your hands. He turned to Skylar and Harper. You two will face similar consequences. I'll be speaking with your parents personally. Mr. Martinez, Harper said, tears streaming down her face. Please, my dad will. Your dad will do what's right. Or he'll find himself explaining to the community why he supports bullying behavior. Maya watched this reversal of fortune with a mixture of satisfaction and wariness. Justice felt good, but she'd learned not to trust it completely. People with power could change their minds as easily as they changed their clothes. Miss Stodd, Richard said, focusing on her again, I need to ask you something important. Do you feel safe at this school? The question caught Maya off guard, not because she didn't know the answer, but because no one had ever bothered to ask it before. Not particularly, she admitted. I thought not. That's going to change. Starting now, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Principal Morrison, Richard Martinez. I need you to implement an emergency anti-bullying assembly for tomorrow morning. Yes, the entire school. And I need you to review your current disciplinary policies with the school board. We have some serious problems to address. While Richard spoke, Maya noticed movement in the hallway outside. Students had begun to gather, drawn by the sound of raised voices and the unusual sight of Richard Martinez's official car in the parking lot. Word was spreading that something big was happening in the West Wing bathroom. Furthermore, Richard continued into his phone. I want Miss Maya Stodd appointed as the student representative to the new anti-bullying task force we're forming. Yes, effective immediately. Because sometimes the people who face the worst of a problem are the best equipped to solve it. Maya's eyes widened. Student representative? Task force? This was moving faster than she could process. Richard ended his call and looked at her seriously. Miss Stodd, you've shown remarkable restraint and dignity in an impossible situation. But more than that, you've shown leadership. The kind this school needs. I just wanted to be left alone. Maja said quietly. Sometimes the people who want to be left alone are exactly the ones who need to speak up. Richard replied, You've already proven you can defend yourself. Now I'm asking if you'll help defend others. Maya looked around the bathroom. At Brooklyn, still touching her cheek where her father had slapped her. At Skylar and Harper, crying quietly as they faced consequences they'd never imagined. At the mop in her hands, which had somehow become a symbol of both her humiliation and her strength. What exactly are you asking me to do? Change things. Richard said simply, use your voice, your experience, your obvious intelligence to make sure no other student has to go through what you went through today. It was a bigger responsibility than Maya had ever wanted, bigger than robotics competitions or college applications or any of the individual goals she'd set for herself. But as she stood there, surrounded by the aftermath of a confrontation she'd never sought but had won decisively, Maya realized something important. She was tired of being invisible, tired of surviving instead of thriving, tired of allowing people like Brooklyn Martinez to define the terms of her existence. I'll do it, she said. Richard smiled, and for the first time since entering the bathroom, he looked like a father instead of a politician. Excellent. Your first official act will be presenting your recommendations to the school board next week. I'll make sure you have everything you need. The sound of adult footsteps in the hallway interrupted them. Principal Morrison appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 security guards and looking like a man who'd just realized his comfortable world was about to become very complicated. Mr. Martinez, Principal Morrison said carefully. I came as soon as I got your call. Good, Richard replied. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. As the adults began to discuss policy changes and disciplinary procedures, Maya found herself stepping back from the center of attention. The crisis was over, but the real work was just beginning. She thought about Master Lu, who would want to hear about today's events, about her mother, who deserved to know that her daughter had finally stopped hiding, about the students gathering in the hallway, who would carry word of this confrontation to every corner of Westfield High. By tomorrow, everyone would know that Maya Stodd was not the girl they thought she was, not a victim to be pitied or a target to be ignored, but something far more dangerous. A force for change. As she finally set down the mop and walked toward the bathroom exit, Maya heard Brooklyn call her name. Maya. Wait. She turned back to see Brooklyn standing alone, her friends having been escorted away by their parents, who'd arrived with expressions of mortified fury. I'm sorry, Brooklyn said quietly, not because my father is making me apologize, but because I was wrong. About you. About everything. Maya studied her for a moment. The perfect makeup was gone, replaced by tear tracks and genuine remorse. The designer clothes were wrinkled and stained, the imperious confidence had cracked, revealing something almost human underneath. Apology accepted, Maya said. But Brooklyn? Yeah? If you ever try something like this again, action with me or anyone else, you'll discover that what happened today was me showing restraint. Brooklyn nodded quickly. I understand. Good. Maya walked out of the bathroom and into a hallway full of staring students. She met their gazes steadily, no longer the girl who hid behind her hair and hurried through empty corridors. As she made her way to her locker, Maya heard whispers following in her wake. But for the first time in 3 months, they weren't whispers of mockery or pity. They were whispers of respect. And deep in her pocket, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard about what happened today. The community center could use someone like you on our youth board. If you're interested, Master Lu. Maya smiled as she typed back her response. I'm interested in everything now. The hallway noise faded into background static as Maya Stod walked toward her future, not the quiet, invisible future she'd planned, but something bigger, something that would require her to be seen, to be heard, to be exactly as formidable as she'd always been beneath the surface. Behind her, the old bathroom stood empty except for a mop bucket and the echoes of a revolution that had started with a single word. No. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. At lunch, Maya no longer sat alone. A diverse group had formed around her table, 20 former outcasts who'd found their voices, reformed bullies working to make amends, and allies who'd been waiting for permission to care openly. The cafeteria buzzed with productive energy. Instead of predatory tension, Maya called a voice from across the room. She turned to see Skylar Johnson approaching, carrying a clipboard and looking nervous but determined. I wanted to thank you, Skylar said when she reached the table. The peer counseling program you recommended? It's helping more than I thought possible. Skylar had been one of the biggest surprises of the aftermath. Her punishment had included mandatory therapy, where she discovered that her bullying behavior stemmed from her own insecurities about never being smart enough for her academically obsessed parents. Now she was channeling that understanding into helping other students navigate similar pressures. We're all in this together, Maya replied, meaning it. That evening, Maya sat in Master Lu's office after training, reviewing applications for the Coalition's summer leadership camp. Master Lu poured tea with the same precision he brought to everything, then settled across from her with a thoughtful expression. You have exceeded even my expectations. Little Dragon, he said, using his old nickname for her. But I must ask, are you prepared for what comes next? Maya looked up from the applications. What do you mean? Success brings new challenges. Other schools want to implement your model. The state education department has called. A documentary crew wants to film your story. He paused, letting that sink in. The question is not whether you can handle the spotlight. The question is whether you can maintain your center when the whole world is watching. Maya considered this as she sipped her tea. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of interviews, meetings, and responsibilities she'd never imagined wanting. But through it all, she'd held on to the core lesson that bathroom confrontation had taught her. True strength wasn't about proving you could fight. It was about choosing when to stop holding back. Master Lu, she said finally, 3 months ago, I would have said I just wanted to survive high school and get into MIT. And now? Maya smiled, thinking of David Kim's relieved face, Brooklyn's genuine apology, and the dozens of students who'd found the courage to speak up because someone had shown them it was possible. Now I want to make sure no one else has to choose between survival and dignity. Master Lu nodded approvingly. Then you are ready for whatever comes next. Outside the dojo windows, The sun set over a world that looked exactly the same but felt fundamentally different. And in that space, between who she'd been and who she was becoming, Maya Stad discovered that sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning a fight, it's teaching others they don't have to fight alone.